and monster drops. This is all very deliberate despite being incredibly unfun, serving to keep players around long after they've completed the game's core offerings. In Star Rail, there's a rare character named Acheron whose overworld ability lets you kill enemies without having to fight them. I wonder why they did that. While Woods notes that the attempt to circumvent spending allows you kill enemies without having to fight them. I wonder why they did that. While Woods notes that the attempt to circumvent spending allows players to feel like they're outsmarting the game rather than being held captive by its design, he also mentions that sunk cost can inevitably be the thing that leads to a purchase, as the harder a player tries to beat the system, the more intangible capital, or time, they spend doing so. Because banners will eventually guarantee a rare character drop through a mechanic that is actually, seriously, genuinely called the pity system, money ends up being a failsafe in the event that players are unable to save up enough free currency. Essentially, in the process of attempting to outsmart the game, players are still, drumroll please, playing the game. Even if a player never spends money, they will waste a significant amount of time in an attempt to beat a system that is poorly designed on purpose. With every hour you put into a gacha game, its hooks only sink in deeper, and the harder it becomes to ever quit or uninstall. After all, you've put in so much time, I mean hard work, into accumulating these characters and resources. Surely it wasn't all for nothing, so why not spend some money? You've earned it. And now that you've invested both time and money, well, quitting isn't an option anymore. Paid offerings also aren't limited to the gacha system itself, as many games allow you to circumvent some, but not all, of the monotony, with grinding developed in a way to make the premium route feel like a rational choice. While cosmetics do exist, bundles and battle passes rarely feature them, instead offering items that allow you to bypass the shitty parts of the game. XP materials, crafting resources, better weapons, you name it. Spending is further encouraged through the obfuscation of what $1 might be worth, an idea also found in slot machines that quickly turn real money into credits. For example, in Star Rail, real money can be used to purchase a premium currency called Oneric Shards, which change in price based on how many you buy at once. Oneric Shards can then be traded for a separate currency called Stellar Jades, which are then used to purchase different types of Star Rail passes to pull on banners, but you can also use Oneric Shards to purchase rotating bundles. So like, how much did that 10 pull cost? Fuck if I know, I'm gonna do another one. Take a look at the nauseating level of storefronts, and you'll also find plenty of shady tactics to encourage spending. Membership passes that require daily logins to maximize their value, bundles that seem like a better deal than standard shop prices, intro offers that give you double the amount of currency on your first purchase, even pop-up deals that expire in a matter of minutes or hours. Whoa, huh? Flash sale? 2 hours left. Oh, fuck, guys. Fuck!
Dude, you're gonna run out. Fine. But if you were to get all three, that'd be $16, dude. What a steal.
Fuck, dude. 7 times EFF. What does that mean?
These ideas aren't unique to gacha by any means. Hell, many of them come straight from gambling, but they make the landscape of microtransactions increasingly more hostile to navigate. What's that in the corner, like barely visible? Zoom in on it. Oh, of course, the please play in moderation and spend rationally warning. You know, like the ones you see in... Oh, no.
Jugadores, llega lo nuevo de KFC y el juego del calamar. Burger, alitas y tiras.
Another factor that drives spending can be found in the genre's prioritization of marketable and highly fleshed out character designs to facilitate parasocial relationships. Almost all gacha games have a heavy emphasis on slice of life or romance events to flesh out characters in casual settings and allow players to become more attached to them, even before pulling on their banner. Also, any passing familiarity with anime or gacha games is enough to pick up on their hypersexualization, a very intentional and sometimes questionable detail that only furthers player attachment. It's not her. No!
That's a child.
With a whip, dude? Incorrect. When considering the frictionless with a whip, dude? Incorrect. When considering the frictionless design of the average gacha game, rarely is excessive spending required unless you want to complete every piece of content as quickly as possible. It's less about what Jane Doe's skills do and more about getting to stare at her butt.
This character is very special because of her beautiful walk, and oh my god, that cake even jiggles. She has been nominated as the thickest character in the Hoyoverse. When compared to Ju Yuan, it's tough to determine the winner because both bakeries are great. Nominated as the thickest character, beautiful walk, and oh my god, that cake even jiggles. She has been nominated as the thickest character in the Hoyoverse. When compared to Ju Yuan, it's tough to determine the winner because both bakeries are great.
Discussing the impact of gacha game communities is tricky, because if anything, it's often one of the most valuable takeaways. Live service inherently cultivates more active communities through a constant flow of new events, trailers, characters, and gameplay updates. The sheer popularity of gacha games has led them to dominate fan art and cosplay scenes in recent years, and the Fate Grand Order fans draw some lovely comics. Plus, most players are well aware of the hells in which they exist, often joking about being trapped or bonding over the shared suffering of bad pulls. Hell, the very first video I made on this topic, in which I applauded and recommended several titles, was called "Gacha Games Are Ruining My Life." As much as players can have individual relationships with games and find enjoyment in flashier attack animations with bigger numbers and bigger cleavage, there's often a social value to the digital collection aspect. It feels good to get a rare character that other people don't have. It's exciting to optimize a meta team or steamroll a difficult mission with an overpowered unit. These feelings are fun in ways that are exclusive to gacha. But since the companies behind these titles are well aware that maintaining a strong fan base is essential to running a freemium game, they often seek to bolster their communities by encouraging and exploiting participation. They also do data tracking. A lot of data tracking. Jolene Bloom's paper on Genshin Impact explores the concept of a media mix, the use of secondary art forms like anime and music, as well as social media platforms and advertising to keep people interested in a center, which in this case is the gacha game. For weeks before new updates are released, players are drip-fed teasers and content to build excitement, culminating in original soundtracks, lavish animations, and gameplay demonstrations. There's nothing inherently wrong with this. It's one of the coolest parts about the live service genre. But the second part is where things get a bit more insidious. If you've played a live service game before, you're probably familiar with the concept of a daily login bonus, but modern gachas, especially Hoyoverse titles, take the idea several steps further. You can earn additional rewards for grinding and gacha pulls by following social media pages, leaving comments on official forum posts, and by checking in every day on external websites, many of which often look like slot machines. This gamification of actions that players often take of their own volition is another way that gacha games seek to deeply embed themselves into the lives of players to ensure long-term retention. Hoyoverse also facilitates unpaid fan art, cosplay, strategy guides, streams, and other content through contests, many of which offer in-game currency as a major reward.
Canta el ritmo de las ofertas en Amazon.
Player-generated content such as this may be conceptualized as participatory culture, but is in reality free labor for the developer. This blurring of the boundary between labor and leisure in Genshin Impact's grinding practices can be identified as playbur, a form of exploitation that masks user-generated content as playful, but is in fact a commodification of leisure as labor, capitalizing on consumer creative output without compensation. Such labor practices fit within the larger trend of digital games becoming increasingly designed in terms of productivity to manipulate player populations to increase their time and or spending on the game.
There's nothing inherently wrong with a game studio interacting with its community, but there's also a real difference between giveaways and spec work. There's also a difference between cosmetic prizes and prizes that impact gameplay. One of the big reasons live service games have become so controversial is that the amount of time they demand from players can be exhausting. But once you learn about gacha, dude, Fortnite looks like baby shit. These companies seek to blur the line between game and reality. They want the game to be your life. If you're not rotating between daily missions in Genshin, Star Rail, and Zenless, Hoyoverse wants you to be reading forums, installing apps on your phone, and sending characters off on expeditions so you can grind in between grinding. They want you to share their ads and create free content for their benefit. Also, you can have a chance at a bit more fun in their game. None of this is a monetary price, but it just feels wrong for the cost to be this high. So, we now know that gacha games are very good at what they do, but I could have told you some of this 10 years ago. The main difference now is the scale. And my god, are the scales just like really big. As much as I'd love to criticize every design choice in a game like Star Rail, not much has changed on a fundamental level. It's all a little weird and fucked up, sure, but limited banners, character grinding, and daily missions have been a staple of the genre since its insurgence in the early 2010s, and free games that can be played on a phone are wildly popular, no two ways about it. The real idea that led me to write this video is that these games are evolving within the gaming sphere and thus influencing it. And to illustrate that, we have to talk about the primordial beast itself, Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact's monumental success made it the gold standard for a new wave of gacha games seeking to make the jump to PC and consoles. Upon its release in 2020, it was one of the most expensive games ever developed, drawing comparisons to Breath of the Wild and receiving widespread praise from critics and general audiences. Millions of people fell in love with this game because it redefined what a gacha game could be. It also made a shit ton of money. Like one of the most profitable games in history type money. Like $2 billion in its first year type money. Developers in both East Asia and the West immediately took notice, and the last 4 years have seen a huge shift in where gacha games sit next to more traditional releases, as well as more widespread adoption of manipulative mechanics. I mean, why make an affordable skin for Jinx fans to enjoy after the release of Arcane when you can put it behind a gacha banner that requires up to $250 of investment, thus making it artificially scarce and more desirable. Oh, and announce it the day after a bunch of layoffs too. That would be sick. The most direct result of Hoyoverse shaking up this space is the current wave of Genshin likes. Doesn't really have the same ring as Souls likes, but you get the idea. Instead of looking at how Genshin redefined the possibilities of the genre, other studios started ripping elements of Hoyoverse games wholesale, such that art styles, UI elements, monetization structures, and large swaths of games themselves are indistinguishable from Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact, but you can lock onto enemies like Dark Souls. Genshin Impact, but it's a cozy dress-up game. Genshin Impact, but you can stare at girls in bed while they sleep. There's Unending Dawn, Ananta, Azure Pramelia, Neverness to Everness, Duet Night Abyss, and the new one they announced at the Game Awards. I can't keep up with this shit.
En Imagine nos hemos dado cuenta de una cosa. La gente pasa de la publi. Y aunque seamos una banca con la que te puedes llevar hasta 500 euros por venir y que no te cobra comisiones, da igual. Total, como la gente pasa de la publi. Únete a Imagine y llévate hasta 500 euros. Descúbrelo en imagine.com. Imagine.
Genshin Impact?
It's literally just Genshin Impact. This is Genshin Impact.
No fucking way, dude. This is Mondstadt. It's the same town.
Is it not just Genshin?
None of these are outright plagiarism, but the resemblance is so uncanny that it wouldn't be hard to convince the average gamer that every high-budget 3D gacha game released in the past 4 years, or set to release in the near future, is made by the same studio. In writing this video, I've retreaded so much of the same ground that I covered in my Genshin video because, well, Genshin used the old blueprint to define a new one. Gacha games have always been huge in East Asia, but the release and reception of Genshin has signaled a global shift as free mobile games are becoming virtually indistinguishable, both visually and culturally, from traditional premium games. There are a few examples I could lead with as direct as the Game Awards, where Hoyoverse has taken home accolades for the past 3 years. Best Mobile Game in 2021 and 2023, and Player's Choice in 2022. Alongside this, they're being constantly promoted during the Game Awards and at major events like Summer Games Fest and Gamescom. This normalization can also be found in reviews from game journalists and traditional media outlets, which have exploded in number after the release of Genshin. Despite the subjectivity of each individual's opinion, I find that day one reviews, sometimes written after playing private early access builds, fail to accurately depict long-term engagement with the gacha game, and may lead players unfamiliar with the genre into a sense of confidence by ignoring or understating certain mechanics. The structure of traditional reviews, which often attempt to outline the core gameplay and aesthetics of a complete experience, feels unfitting for games of this nature, and often ends up missing large parts of the conversation. Also, I just want to clearly state that I am in no way trying to encourage personal attacks or anti-journalist sentiment. Many of these reviewers genuinely enjoyed these games, and expecting any outlet to pass up on major releases would be silly. I bring up all of these examples out of a larger concern for the future of live service. The first oddity is in how some reviewers describe their personal experience. Before discussing how unlocking characters in Genshin actually works, IGN's review describes them in a way that ignores both the gacha system and the specific moment the author played the game.
And once you start unlocking new characters, each with their own fighting style, abilities, and elemental affinities, you gain completely new ways of interacting with the world. A lake initially too vast to swim across becomes easily traversable with the help of a cryo-type character like Kaeya. Mountain peaks too steep to climb become scalable once you unlock Venti and his ability to create wind currents wherever he pleases.
Problem is, you don't just unlock Venti like you catch a Pokemon that can learn fly. I played over 100 hours of Genshin, and I never got Venti. Because I literally couldn't. He was featured on a limited banner which was unavailable during the months I played, so I never had the ability to create wind currents. As of the time of writing this video, Venti hasn't been available for over a year, but the sentence is worded with the same certainty that Tulin will give you the ability to ride wind currents in Tears of the Kingdom. There's a similar sentiment in Screen Rant's Star Rail review, which lauds the variety of character roles in the same way you might discuss team building in SMT.
There are 7 elements that serve as a means to break enemy weaknesses, and balancing a team that's spread out with these elements while also functional represents a significant challenge. Flexibility seems to be the name of the game when it comes to Honkai Star Rail.
Again, this idea is separate from the brief paragraph critiquing the game for gating its own content, nor does it mention the effort and grinding required to make party members combat ready. Another interesting trend I've noticed is that Western audiences are becoming more and more accustomed to gacha mechanics, so as to not include warnings or discussion in more recent reviews, with some even writing jokes about funding their gacha addiction or luck from the gacha gods. When it comes to reviews of Zenless Zone Zero, GameSpot almost entirely ignores the existence of gacha or microtransactions, partially because of their accurate opinion that the game is too easy. Games Radar spends 3 sentences outlining gacha while not even mentioning any any of the other microtransactions at play. Destructoid doesn't mention either at all. As for IGN, it's one sentence, but this bizarre disconnect is illustrated by a passage near the end of the review.
Given the unusually generous nature of the review build Hoyoverse provided access to ahead of release, which made all currently released characters available right away, it was difficult to get a clear picture of how Zenless Zone Zero's progression systems will feel long term.
These reviews are written in a manner adjacent to premium games, unable to analyze long-term issues at play. Despite the fact that Hoyoverse games are designed with tons of tricks in mind, you'll find that a lack of PvP or intense difficulty often leads to the same conclusions.
You really can't beat free so long as you resist the rather tame temptations to spend money.
You can play the full game without ever spending a penny, just not with a full character roster.
You'll be able to clear all content reliably with just the default characters.
There's still a ridiculous amount of content for a free game, and that makes it worth it, if you can make it through without spending any money.
Similar issues can also be found in the influencer sphere, where variety content from larger creators, often sponsored thanks to massive marketing budgets, tends to celebrate positive or interesting aspects of gacha while ignoring more nuanced discussions. For games that are reaching huge new audiences, including children, with next to zero regulation on their microtransactions and advertising, the coyness with which many discuss or outright dismiss gacha mechanics still feels kinda surreal. Even beyond reviewers and influencers, millions of players are willing to put up with a general disrespect for their time and a constant clawing at their wallets if there's simply enough content within a free-to-play experience. But I ultimately question what that might mean for the future of live service games. Even though I am a full-time professional gacha hater, I do think there's a lot to love about these games, and I never want to diminish someone's interests or the hard work of passionate artists. I'll be the first to tell you that the Hoyoverse composers go absolutely ballistic on everything they work on, and I've been listening to tracks from Star Rail and Zenless on a pretty regular basis. On a gameplay level, Star Rail is the closest I got to wanting to continue playing a Hoyoverse game. Despite each character only having a basic attack and 2 skills, abilities are fairly intricate and bosses are designed with some neat gimmicks. Plus, the art design is stylish enough to make it fun at times. There's merit to Kafka spinning around with a bunch of guns and going boom. Or when Adventure to Kafka spinning around with a bunch of guns and going boom. Or when Aventurine yells, "Or maybe I'll take it all," as giant poker chips rain down across the screen. However, I was also playing through Metaphor ReFantazio at the same time, and the contrast between that game, which properly immersed and challenged me for a set runtime, and Star Rail, in which I spent the same amount of time doing New York Times puzzles on my phone while I autoed through the story mode, was quite large. Quite a chasm of a difference. Plus, the grinding is so bad that I barely even made it to the supposed challenging part that is the end game. I've also been dabbling with Infinity Nikki. I dabble, and I don't hate it. It's filled with an adorable and detailed dress-up system, all woven into a chill exploration loop and a bubbly positive vibe, which hell yeah, we need more girl games. But the themes of creativity and designing your dream look just feel tarnished when this isn't a traditional game where you can unlock all the outfits by playing, but is instead a nefarious free-to-play concoction where you're constantly beckoned to daily grinds and gacha storefronts that are a near one-to-one rip of Genshin Impact. I say all of this to once again illustrate that gacha games are indeed video games, and they can be really fun. This isn't a black and white gambling bad situation, but instead a discussion about the no-limits, uncharted realm of live service. Free-to-play games offer incredible amounts of value, and should be allowed to extract revenue from players, but the way more and more companies are choosing to do it is far more insidious than charging a standard entrance fee or drawing the line at cosmetics. I mean, it's no secret that the gacha economy is driven by whales, a small percentage of players that spend thousands upon thousands of dollars in pursuit of maxed out collections. Just because you can technically play the game for free doesn't mean there isn't a bright, glittering Pandora's loot box around every corner, purpose-built to extract every last penny from those most vulnerable, in ways eerily similar to casinos that promote the facade of responsible gambling while exploiting their most addicted customers. I also didn't talk about PvP because, man, if you let people think they're better at a game than other people, you win. Even beyond their hazy ethics, I think what really scares me is that in gacha games, I see a boring future. The sheer potential based on budgets alone is exciting in theory, but in practice, they're created by committees to maximize profit, so terrified to lose even a single player that they eschew any valuable friction or difficulty for a yellow brick road of dopamine hits that